Hello and welcome to SimCast, the higher education simulation podcast. My name's Lawrence Hill and I'm joined here by my regular co-host, Mr. Tony Jermy.
Thank you, Lawrence. Hello and welcome to SimCast. Glad to have you with us.
And today we're joined by Lindsay McLeish. Lindsay, welcome to SimCast.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for having me.
So Lindsay is an intensive care nurse and head of skills and simulation practice at Buckinghamshire New University with a professional background in the Royal Air Force, extensive experience in aeromedical retrieval of critically unwell patients and delivering high quality simulation in live aircraft environments. We're definitely going to have to dig into that. You're also the co-author of Simulated Practice Learning in Nurse Education, which was published in the BJN, the British Journal of Nursing in 2025, which explores the educational, psychological and infrastructural, if that's a word, role of simulated practice learning within contemporary nursing curricula. Wow.
And that's one of the reasons we're going to get you on today is to speak a little bit more about simulated practice learning, but I think we're going to explore some sort of generic simulation and your journey. And
it's lovely to have you in the studio. Thank you so much for coming all the way to Norfolk to be with us, because it's so nice to actually have you in the studio.
I know, and it's so nice to be here. And as I said, it's my home roots. You know, I trained at UEA Norwich, so it's really nice to come back here and remind myself of what it was all like. So
we've given you a little bit of a tour around the centre, which has changed a lot since you were here as a student.
It looks nothing like. I was hoping I was going to come in and have all these flashbacks of, I remember, being over there, but I didn't. However, you did show me the lecture theatre, and I do remember sitting there watching A&P lectures.
Nice.
So.
Yeah. And there we are. So looking forward to this very much.
If you enjoyed the episode, please give us a like. Equally so, if you didn't like the episode, give us a dislike, but let us know in the comments why, because we're always keen to improve. To keep up to date with all things Sim, subscribe to the channel and don't forget to check the notification bell. And SimCast is available on all popular streaming platforms. Right, that's the call to action and pleasantries out of the way. I always think for the guests, just turn into the camera.
Yeah, it's a bit rude,
weird, isn't it?
Anyway, we'll ignore that. So before we get into all of that great stuff that we've talked about in your bio, something that we've just loved to ask people is just why? Like, why do you do what you do, Lindsay?
My main driving force for why I do what I do with simulation all comes back to patients. Patient safety is massive to me. It's why I got into nursing, because I wanted to improve patient care outcomes, and I stumbled across simulation, which I think has a massive impact on patient safety and improving care outcomes for patients. So that is literally the reason I do what I do.
Amazing. Back to the patient.
And you were saying that simulation, before we did the recording, that simulation wasn't part of your kind of everyday life and practice until
when I was in the military. Yeah. So when I was doing that retrieval of intensive care patients, I came into the job where I then trained healthcare professionals, so consultant anaesthetists, nurses, of allied healthcare professionals, how to retrieve intensive care patients, sort of aeromedical evacuation. So
that was your first flavour of simulation?
That was my first flavour.
As a participant?
As the instructor.
Yeah,
as the instructor.
Did you do much sim before?
I was saying to you, wasn't I? I can't actually remember doing any simulation in my nursing programme. And don't get me wrong, it's really important to say simulation is massive within the military. And so I suppose I was exposed to simulation prior to deployment. So before we would deploy, there was this massive sort of hospital facility that was set up like Camp Bastion Hospital. And we would go there as a team, and we would, before the team we were deploying with, and they would literally run scenarios all the way through that hospital. So we could get, prepared before we deploy. So more of that operational readiness piece. So, but I suppose I really grasped what simulation was when I became teaching. I became teaching simulation is when I sort of understood what it was. So, yeah.
That's interesting. And so how did your perception of it change then? Did you say you understood really what it was? What was it about it that changed when you became an instructor?
I think because before I was just doing it because I thought I had to. So, it was like, oh yeah, you need to have a practice. But I was like, and I wasn't really understanding the fact how much this was impacting what I was going to do, that it was just something, it was a tick box. I had to do this scenario. I had to be exposed to it because that's what they said to do. It was in the military, right? You do what you're told. But it wasn't until I started delivering simulation, I really understood the effects on how it could massively improve that patient safety piece, how it could really improve, our people that we were training, their sort of knowledge around whatever we're going to do, and how it fills that gap between that sort of theory to practice is which is when I suppose I started to
I'm
realise.
sure there are people listening to this who have, when they think about their simulation journeys, that resonates with them.
Yeah.
Just doing simulation because it was the right thing to do or what you've been told to do.
Yeah.
I just wonder as well, like whether there's like that conceptual leap that you make when you become an instructor and say, oh, like I really see why this is valuable. But how often, the real value of simulation remains hidden. Like the real value remains latent to the learner.
Absolutely.
And potentially stays that way.
Yeah. And like I said in the beginning, I stumbled across simulation in a way when I got into the teaching job, because the job I was teaching was to train allied healthcare professionals how to use bits of equipment. So when we would deploy with our equipment, it was with certain ventilators, certain infusion pumps, and all the learning objectives were for that course was to be able to know how to use that ventilator, because we were all in different trusts across the NHS. So we had to come together.
Right, of course.
Yeah, know how to use that equipment. It was an equipment course. And then I came on it, and then I noticed that actually this course wasn't fit for purpose because the operation tempo changed. We weren't in Afghanistan anymore. So people were getting that skill fade. So they still needed to know how to use that equipment. However, I wanted them to be ready for practice and ready for operations. So I redesigned the course so it was more high fidelity. We were taking them up in live aircraft, using that equipment, but in scenarios. So they did all the pre-learning of how to use that equipment. And then when they come onto the course, we then just literally would say, right, let's go up in that live aircraft and let's practice what happens when the ventilator fails then, and do it within scenarios. So that's how we sort of changed the course.
What, when you compare the military to healthcare and simulation, what are the sort of key differences?
I would say let me go back. I would say with that, I try to bring those differences so they're not there.
Yeah, okay.
Does that make sense? Like I try to make sure that everything should have intention. So, and that's the thing I think I massively learned within the military. I said I started with that, I did simulation because I had to.
Yeah.
What I soon learned when I was delivering it is all simulation needs to have an intention, has to have purpose. So I do that same now with delivering simulation with pre-registration nurses, for example.
And that purpose isn't look what we can do with simulation, which is often what sometimes happens in the simulation naive hands.
No, it's more about why am I doing this simulation? So for example, I was doing it in the military because people needed to be ready for operations. Why am I delivering simulation for nursing students? They need to be ready to look after practice. It's exactly the same. Apart from the context is slightly different. It's not hot and sandy in the NHS, but it's the same.
So when we look at, and I'll come back to you in a minute, Lawrence, but when we look at simulation and simulate practice learning now in the nursing landscape, which is very much is kind of an appendage to an already established healthcare curricula. Is there differences there? Was simulation in the military much more kind of established and foundational?
Yeah, I think it was more about the risk. We were delivering simulation, I think, in the military because obviously you needed to, as much as possible, prevent mistakes happening. Okay, so we were doing things because we needed to ensure people were operationally ready to go, to be deployed. Where I suppose at the moment, and we still wanted those mistakes to happen within the simulation because obviously that creates learning opportunities, and I'm all for making mistakes within that. But I suppose within the nursing curriculum,
it's still about risk, isn't it? But the risk is hidden.
Hidden, absolutely. It's absolutely hidden. So yeah. And I always try and bring out that as much as possible. I want people to make mistakes with the simulation.
I often think this because I'm also interested in human factors and with a link to patient safety. And when I teach it and I compare other high risk industries, whether it's aviation, the military, railway, nuclear power, the risk is much more apparent to the person involved. If a pilot crashes an airplane,
if the reactor melts down,
there's a high likelihood that everyone's going to die. If the reactor melts down, there's a high likelihood that everyone. In healthcare, it's different, isn't it? Because the risk is very much patient focused.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the individuals, I guess it's what's hidden to an extent. I mean, you're still going to get the fallout of something horrendous happens to a patient, then you're going to have to go through that as a healthcare practitioner. But your life is less likely to be on the line, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there's an element with that, like what I call like the sort of hidden curriculum within simulation. So more about the thing I really try and focus on within like the pre-registration nursing program, for example, is all about that sort of teamwork. communication, those leadership straight from the get-go. I really push my students out of their comfort zone and say, you need to be developing as leaders straight away within my simulation. So from year one, I'll have them managing the bay as the ward, as the bay manager, or acting as the lead nurse that day. So they are developing those sort of skills. So obviously simulation has a place for skills and stuff like that, but that's never really where I focus the simulation that I'm delivering. It's more around what I call this sort of hidden curriculum within it.
That really speaks to the question I was going to ask actually, which was about like the intention. So so when you talk about making the intention really clear, it's about making the previously hidden parts of the curriculum really clear as well, I guess, because it's easy to write intended learning outcomes around equipment, like use like the kind of technical side of it. But really, what I'm hearing is that you're saying actually the hidden part is the non-technical side of it, which is critical for safety. But and we've wondered about this before. So tell us, what do you do? Because we've talked before, haven't we, about the importance of increasing like non-technical skills training, but we wait for some reason until we get to full ward style scale simulation and say, right, improve your non-technical skills. And this
is a bugbear of mine, because when I teach human factors on some of the programs, I teach as a final year topic. I'm like, this is year one. This is basic stuff.
So what do you do? So tell us about what you do in that space.
With those sort of non-technical skills. So I try and always put myself into what does my student need to know at the moment? Does that make sense? What is going to prepare them best for practice? So for example, in my year one, and it's all about that scaffolding. I scaffold my simulation all the time. So for my year ones, for example, if we think about those non-technical skills like communication, so I do one of the scenarios is around end-of-life care, because, and again, that's me reflecting back to when I was a student nurse. The first time I remember being involved in end-of-life care was in an A&E department. Sadly the patient died, and I had all these questions of like, why are we doing that? Why are we doing last officers? What does that mean? But didn't want to ask my sort of practice supervisor, practice assessor, or mentor back in the day on why they were doing those questions. So I will try and put that into my simulation. So I'll do an end of life sort of scenario, but build in those non-technical skills. Okay, well, there's the relative. You then need to go and explain to that relative, like, what's happened, what are the next steps, and get them to communicate. Because if you speak to the practice partners, this is one of the things that they say our students lack the most. It's that confidence in communications, or little things I do as well. I'll just ring the ward phone in the sim lab and they have to answer it. And it's the scariest bit of the simulation. There's a cardiac arrest over there.
I was doing some large scale simulation last week with some midwives, and what was it? One of the scenarios, something was happening, and I said, "Yeah, but we'll do a phone call. What actually pick up the phone? Yeah."
This is so funny, because this has come up a few times in the past, doesn't it? Yeah. So this has come up.
Dave Aziz
was a previous guest and a friend of mine and of ours. He is a pharmacist by background, and he said that nothing had prepared him for having to make a professional phone call.
Yeah.
Like, he qualified as a pharmacist. Then they're like, what do you mean I need to speak to someone on the phone?
I know. And I do loads of that. I'll just ring the ward, and it would just literally be a relative just asking how their patient is in bed too. How's my mum doing?
It's becoming a more of a hidden skill, because societally you don't make phone calls.
No, you don't.
If someone phones you, you go, no, not going to answer that.
No, you don't. And we do that, don't we?
And also,
not I don't do that to anyone that calls me.
Not professionally anyway.
But before that, before the mobile, it was, hi, can I speak to so-and-so, please? Yeah, hello, Mr. Arbon. Can I speak to...
as a child growing up, you had to phone up the family phone and speak to the parent.
Speak to the parent.
So-and-so come back to play.
All the other things I'll do is like, so when they're running the bay, so I will go in and act as the consultant doing the ward round, and I'll challenge them. I'll be a bit rude, or does that make sense? And they've got to learn how to speak to me, how to manage me, or I'll be like, I don't know, not listening to them, not replying when they're speaking to me, and just, try and get them a bit more confident to sort of, be able to speak to me and sort of say, actually, I'm not happy with the way you're speaking to me. Or I'll do things on purpose. I'll go in there with a watch on, or I'll go in there, leaning over the patient's bed without washing my hands. Just real basic, those sort of, to challenge them to be able to talk and advocate for their patients. So,
and do you introduce that as part of the intention? Of the scenario? So like, I might do things in this simulation where I'd expect you to say something, because for me, and we've talked about this before, there's a line between kind of throwing these kind of
going rogue
kind of stooge behaviours, and then and then there being a kind of a boundary there about, is this an effective, psychologically safe learning environment? Like, is this part of the simulation?
Of course, yeah.
And so I'm just interested to how you
so I absolutely
navigate
do that, because the way where my simulation sits on the program, and I'm just talking about the nursing program here. So they have a skills module leading up until they come to us. So it's really purposeful when I'm talking about SPL, where you place your SPL on the program to make it have that meaningful and that intention. So for example, they come to me at the end of their skills module, their first week before they ever go into the clinical placement area. They'll come to me myself for a week and my team having an SPL sort of week. And there's learning outcomes at the beginning of the week that I brief them, say, these are the things we're going to cover. And I say to them, I said, you'll be challenged on your communication skills, and I'll have like these really clear defined learning outcomes. And then what we do within the day, there'll be a ward that they're sort of running with. And then I tell them that these injects are going to happen, but we always do lots of hot and regular debrief. So if that scenario happens, I might take that person out and go, let's have a little chat about how you just communicated with that doctor there, and we stop and pause regularly throughout the day. So I try and make it realistic, because let's be honest, when they're in the clinical placement, that's not going to happen. So I try and do that, but make sure that these learning outcomes are clearly defined from the beginning of the week. Does that make sense?
So go on, Tony.
I was just going to say, so it sounds like you've got quite a lot of clout on your program in terms of making this SPL a reality and being able to really plan it. And like you say, it being very purposefully at different points of the curriculum. How much work do you get to do with the curriculum design side of things and the program teams?
So to be really frank, when I first started bringing SPL, it was like anything. The NMC said we can have 600 hours of SPL. We decided when the curriculum was being designed, prior to me really coming into this role, we're going to deliver some SPL. And that was it. They were kind of already dipping their toes in the water. They were doing a bit of peep with the mental health.
But it wasn't firmly established as part of a sort of foundational part of the curriculum.
And because it got built into the curriculum, that's when we've got to do it now, because we are saying to the NMC, it's in our program, we're committed, we've got to do this. So then I just basically designed it from scratch. So I was very fortunate in that. In other words, to start something that's not happening, it's easier, isn't it? To then say, right, this is how we're going to deliver. This is how we're going to ensure it's SSSA compliant, okay? This is how it's going to be purposeful. It's going to be scaffolded. We're going to make sure that it's completely learner-centered on what they need to do within the program, if that makes sense. So that's how I have the clout to do that. And still, even now, we're about to go for a curriculum change again. And I lean into the skills module because I want the skills modules to complement the SPL. So it's that bridging all the time. So I do have a lot of clout, I suppose. Was that the answer to the question?
No.
Yeah.
And so what does the SPL program look like then at BNU at Bucks?
So at BNU at the moment, we're just doing, and this is the thing, we can do 600 hours. And I think that's what's really important to get out here. You don't have to do 600 hours. It sounds lovely.
Because again, once you've said, right, we're going to do 600 hours, it's very, very difficult to get back from that.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
Do we need to contextualize this a little bit, like in terms
I guess so, for people
So if folk are listening, if guys are listening to this and it's not clear what we're talking about when it comes to SPL. So the Nursing Midwifery Council in the UK permit approved education providers of nursing curriculum to essentially replace, I think is probably the kind of technical verb. Practice hours with simulation hours. And they've given programs permission to do that for up to 600 of the 2,300 hours in a nursing curriculum.
You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong here. So some of it came from the COVID-19 pandemic when learners couldn't get into placement. And so there was a recommendation that these simulated practice hours could take place instead. That then increased, and then the NMC adjusted their guidance for new ways of working post-pandemic.
Yeah, I think they saw that it was effective, and they said that we could, continue doing that. And I think, just for a caveat there, this was prior to me being in higher education, in case everyone's saying that's not how it happened. But, that's the gist of it.
And initially, when people heard that nurses wouldn't be on placement doing something, they would be doing it in a simulated, I think it's fair to say there was a sharp intake of breath. And
absolutely.
Some people were quite concerned about that, and might have legitimate reasons why that might be.
Yeah, and I think as much as I love simulation, and and I'm not trying to talk myself out of a job here, because I absolutely love simulation and the benefits that it brings.
It'll never replace.
It will never replace practice, and I think that's what's really important. So it has to complement it.
So going back to what Lawrence was saying, it should complement it rather than replace it.
Yeah, exactly. So
even if
because even when you said the word replace, you could feel me clinging onto the table. But
I chose that word to be deliberately provocative.
I sensed it. My eyes raised.
but it's a risk, isn't it? And I think it's an opportunity and a risk. And I think that's that comes through actually in the paper that you wrote. But it's an educational strategy. It's a curriculum strategy. It has to be intentional, to come back to the word that you use, and it has to be robust.
But let's flip it on its head. Isn't practice learning a risk? It's a huge risk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Because again, if you've got a learner who might be in their infancy in maybe year 1 or year 2, they are going to need to be supported a hell of a lot by their practice assessor and supervisor.
Yeah.
And there are so many of those in practice. So being, as an educational institution, trying to make sure that there is that consistency all the way through is a risk in itself.
Yeah, but SPL can help you do that.
I was going to say there's an argument to say that SPL, because you are directing it into something a little bit more concentrated.
Yeah, you can provide equity to your learners, which you can't provide in placement. Someone might be going to a respiratory ward, someone might be going to a cardiac ward, someone go to more acute sense community. So SPL gives you the flexibility to be able to do that, but just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yeah. And I think that's what's really important to get from this.
So you can do up to 600 hours. How many hours do you do?
We're doing 120. So we do 40 hours per year at the moment.
And that was deliberate?
That was deliberate because I felt that's all we could resource. And don't get me wrong, I would love to increase it. The feedback from my students is how much they want more, how much they love it, how much they would rather do 6 weeks than sometimes being in placement. And as much as, like I say, I love simulation, I can see the benefits of it, it doesn't replace practice, but it does give them that's more, I don't want to say more supportive environment, but it gives them an environment where they can make those mistakes. It's got that internal learn outcomes.
And that's the key difference, isn't it? Is that appreciation that simulation is not going to replace practice, but it's different.
It is different.
And it provides some advantages in some ways that practice doesn't. Being able to pause, being able to have reflective conversations as part of a structured debrief, being able to rehearse, repeat if you need to.
Absolutely. And I've seen how simulation can really improve, and I started this off at the beginning, improve that patient safety piece and why it's so valuable and why I'm looking to do my PhD in simulation and the effects of improving patient safety and care outcomes. Because, for example, in the military, we used to do things where before they would deploy, like on an operation, we would do a quality assurance exercise. First time the team would come together and we would focus it on human factors, on about, okay, what are you going to do if this goes wrong here? How are you going to make that work? And one of the scenarios we did was about a ventilator failure, and they practiced it as a team before they deployed. And one of the things that they noticed that, their ventilator was in the box far as over there. So it took longer for them to go and get their spare ventilator, which when they then flew, the ventilator failed and they had to bag the patient for a bit, go and find, because they practiced that drill, it was so swift. I know we know it happens. And you can come on to a bit then talking about that transformative simulation, can't you? How, you're trying to improve, patient safety and stuff like that with your simulation. And that's made me go off a bit on a tangent. But
it's good. It's really important.
It's all interlinked, isn't it?
Because it's tempting to see that the simulation for education and the transformative simulation as separate entities, but they're not. There's a continuum, right?
But also, if I go back to a point I was earlier making to you when I was comparing military to healthcare, when you have retrospectively fitted simulation into your program, if you've got learners who have done a program and done a course where simulation has been integrated, like you said, when you did your training in the 2000s, you didn't really do any simulation. No. If you've grown up with simulation, it's no longer a foreign concept to you. And so if you're going to then move and do transformative simulation as when you're qualified and part of practice, it's a tool that you already know how to use.
Yeah. And this is it. And I'm always trying to do simulation that will, like we sort of said, you can do 600 hours, but why would you if you've got to, the thing is, you've got to want to do simulation. Does that make sense? If you don't have a team behind you at your institute that want to.
So I was going to ask, you mentioned about it about the lack of resources.
Yeah.
What resources do you have? What's the team like?
So there's no team. And I think that's what's important to say. I work on goodwill of a few.
Okay.
So I'm in my...
But how many other people are like that?
So many people. You speak to different HEIs around that in like this UK simulation group that we go on. It's like, oh yeah, there's just me and I'm just trying to get a bit of simulated practice learning going. And this is why I've gone and like sort of spoke about the hybrid model I created, you know, to be able to reduce resources that you can deliver it. So as I said, I sort of designed it from just me, you know, and then don't get me wrong, I've got some great, you know, I'll lean into the module teams to say, oh, are you about, I've created everything, I've designed it. I literally just need what I would say boots on the ground to come and help me deliver the thing. You know, can you come and do that? And that's how it's kind of worked. But then of course, that's why I only do 120 hours. I could absolutely do more if I had more people, but I don't want to stretch. I don't want to stretch people, you know. I don't want to say, I know you're teaching and marking on all this module. Will you also come now and be with me 9 till 5 in the sim lab? Or so that's what's hard.
For the best will of the world, they don't have the same enthusiasm about simulation.
No, of course they don't. And you have 1 or 2 key individuals that like, absolutely, I want to come and play with simulation. But then you have a lot of people that are like, oh, I've not been clinical for a while. I'm just not quite sure. And even though, even like my year 1, it's so basic. It's bed making, it's personal hygiene, it's communication skills. I think because we don't do it enough, you know, academics or when I get people to come in to support it, they're just a bit like,
simulation makes you incredibly vulnerable, both as a learner and also as an instructor or a facilitator, doesn't it?
And the thing is I wish we could reach the people who are apprehensive about facilitating that simulation, because you know the people listening are the ones who are probably organising the simulation, facilitating the simulation, and probably know exactly what you mean when you're talking about the people who are a little bit hesitant and a little bit reluctant. But
then what I would advise those people that are listening is, if you provide them as much information as possible and support them in regards to every inject I'll have an inject tracker. So every inject has a lesson plan on how you deliver that inject, what you expect the student to do, what the learning outcomes are for that inject, how you would debrief that inject. So it's all there for them. So they feel so supported. I'll do faculty meetings before they come, like, come on, like, you know, this is what we'll do. It's all very well supported. This is, you know, you can do all this pre-reading before you come. But that doesn't, you know, you can go so far.
But this is one of the things that the word that I butchered in your introduction was about infrastructure. And I think that's kind of what you're describing here. So the way that you can do this as a one person show is through the building of infrastructure. So that's partly about scenario planning and about briefing. But what else have you had to build
you
in order to...
You mentioned your hybrid model.
My hybrid model.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
So... Because basically, when I first started, no SPL I've delivered has been the same. I'm really responsive to the learners' feedback. The learners, surprisingly, will tell, I say surprisingly, I say that, they want to be in the skills lab as much as possible. They want to be doing hands-on simulation. They love it because it's the job that
do you know what? There are learners out there who don't like simulation, and I think they don't like being vulnerable, but I've never met a healthcare student that says, I want to do less simulation.
No, absolutely. So... You know, I first started by just delivering, so year 1 starts with 1 patient scenario. So they just follow this 1 patient scenario all the way through the week. Keep it really simple. Basic nursing skills, medication administration, how to take vital signs, which they've already had this teaching in their skills. They come to me and then we deliver it like within simulation. So there's this Mrs. Anderson they look after throughout the week and they watch her journey to go to finish in end-of-life care. So I started doing that all face-to-face. However, what made me change to hybrid is my cohort sizes were getting bigger and bigger. And I wanted to keep it real. Like I said, you can deliver it, but it's got to be a valuable learning experience. There's no point doing it just for saying, oh yeah, we're delivering some SPL, because it's not there for me. You know, you've got to have, like we spoke about, clear learning outcomes. It's got to have intention, you know, it's got to be purposeful. So what I decided to do was, how could I keep the group small? So in other words, there's just 16 students per group, and still give them a really valuable learning experience. So I create this hybrid model where I use different modalities of simulation. So I use virtual reality platforms as well as face-to-face delivery in the skills lab. And then I just sort of have this massive beast, as I call it, running over 3 campuses of certain groups doing some in the skills lab while others are online. I created e-learning packages that sort of complemented the Mrs. Anderson scenario. And that's what I designed to be able to still make it effective.
That's not a Matrix reference at all, is it?
What's that?
There's Mr. Anderson in the Matrix, isn't it?
No. Is
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah. So, and I think that what you described there is exactly that kind of infrastructure building. That, you know, the pattern, the rotation, and all about making sure that the live in person kind of face-to-face simulation element is as kind of, I guess, as personal as you can make it.
What's the kind of ratio, just out of interest, if you've got your 120 hours, how much of it is face-to-face, how much of it is online, how much of it is kind of e-learning?
It's this hybrid week. So I do 2 days face-to-face.
Okay.
3 days face-to-face, 2 days online. So one of the days, which is face-to-face, is using a virtual reality platform where we go through the scenarios and I do it with them. And then I put...
Just out of interest, what platform do you use?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, Oxford Medical Simulation.
So you use OMS.
I use OMS
Lots of
heavily.
people are using OMS.
Heavily.
That's before they come and do the face-to-face?
So it depends.
Okay.
So I've used it in 2 ways. So I've used OMS really cleverly. They have got something called OMS Create as well, where you can create your own learning objectives for that scenario. So for example, for an interprofessional learning day I did, we had, it started on the roadside. So we had paramedics on it, we had nurses, and then we had radiographers. So they picked the patient up from the roadside. They brought him into our A&E resus bay and they managed this. He was an RTC patient. And then when they came up to me into the classroom, I had created the scenario with OMS and they got to repeat the scenario by doing it sort of a different way of learning, virtual reality. But what I do within the SPL is we just use scenarios, sort of conditions that Mrs. Anderson has got. So, she's got dementia. So I use a dementia OMS scenario. And then even though it's with a different patient, we can still keep it all contextualized and talk about all the learning outcomes around managing a patient. So with dementia.
Yeah. Synthesis. I mean, that's high. That's great. What a nice way of using the resources there. And so you've got this sort of blend of different technologies. Some of them are quite novel and kind of a bit challenged. Like how do you induct your learners to use them effectively?
So OMS, I literally do in the SPL week. So I do it as it's the first time they meet OMS is when they come to us in the SPL. So as they come, I send them their logins before, tell them to do some pre-reading about OMS. So very similar to what I used to do in the military, send them stuff, have a read about that before you come to me. So they've got a baseline knowledge. Then when they come to us, I will literally give them their logins and then I'll start doing scenarios straight away with them, but it's still linked to that Mrs. Anderson scenario. And we'll debrief straight after the scenario and go, okay. And so they're getting used to the platform and don't kind of realize they're getting used to the platform as well as doing simulation. Does that make sense?
So just for my simple mind, so you come in, they're on laptops. They're in a
I get them to bring their own laptops in.
So they come in, they're on their laptops. You launch a scenario and they do it, and then this is in a group of
16,
and then so they complete the sim, and then you debrief the group. Yeah,
we debrief as a group, and then what I would get them to do is then go off and repeat that scenario on their own, after the debrief. So then they've learned about I need to how I manage this asthma patient or whatever. And then
deliberate practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they have a day where just online doing OMS with me on it, and to keep it so we're still providing that practice supervisor, I'll have a Teams link running throughout the day, and I'm on there with them. And they can come back and join at any point to speak to me about anything, or I get them to come back at regular points and we do debriefs after that scenario, and then I'll give them work around that scenario. So to keeping it all, so it's not just clicking through OMS.
You made a really interesting point earlier, which I just want to come back to, is I think a good simulation educator gets people to learn without them realizing it. Whether it's them learning a new management system or them drawing out the rich learning that they do from simulation, because a lot of learners will just go, okay, well, it's practical. I'm doing practical hands-on skills, but the depth that they're learning through those simulated activities is much, much more profound.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back when you made me think then about a point we were talking about before about faculty and being confident. So when I used to deliver simulation in the military, I was delivering simulation to consultant anaesthetists, who, and there I am talking to them about ventilation, and you're like, and it's hard, isn't it? It's really difficult, and I know mainly we're all doing it now in higher education, pre-reg. And I think that makes people, but I think what that grounded me was actually, you can teach simulation and do scenarios to any level. Does that make sense? And I could still see this consultant anaesthetist was learning loads of me of actually what I was doing. I was creating a scenario where it was maybe bringing out more sort of human factors things, more bringing out some of that leadership, how to communicate with people. And different in the military, that it goes again, I suppose not the NHS hierarchy, I suppose, but in SimCast, the team leader is the nurse. So even though your consultant anaesthetist is on your team, the team leader is always the nurse.
Interesting.
Without wanting to go completely off on a tangent, but I'm going to anyway. What do you think the culture's like between the military and healthcare with that kind of learning?
Very different, I would say. I think, I don't know whether it's a respect thing. I don't know if that's the right word. I think within the military, you're all and you are still trying to do the same job in healthcare, I suppose. But in the military, because you are going into an austere environment as well.
Yeah. This is the point I was trying to make earlier, but I don't think I'd made a very good point. Is do they take simulation more seriously in the military than they do in
because
healthcare?
I think because of you can't afford to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Not that you can afford to make mistakes in healthcare, but the consequences are massive.
So because the risk is high, the hierarchy is almost flattened a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even within the military, there's a rank structure. You're calling people sir, there's wing commanders, group captains, there's all these people, but it didn't matter. And the thing is with nursing, for example, you can go in, as we mentioned, as a non-commissioned officer. So you could go in there as a corporal, and then you could have another nurse come in who's a flight lieutenant, so who's an officer, but you might have more clinical experience than them. Does that make sense? It does flatten. And yes, you respect them because of their rank, your clinical experience, or it does level it off. Does that make sense? And like I said, I would be like a sergeant and be the team leader of SimCast with a wing commander consultant anaesthetist, and he's listening to how I'm managing that mission.
Because in that moment, you're the person keeping everyone alive.
Exactly.
By the way, we won't get Lawrence to comment on ranks because off camera,
I don't want to embarrass you with my encyclopedic knowledge of military rank and structure. So there's so much in the stuff. Yeah. That would be embarrassing for me to have to talk about that for too long. So, but I just think it's really interesting, and I wonder about the simulations that you're running, like, because you were saying as an educator, you're like, this could be seriously below the learner's level of technical kind of know-how and expertise. And I think that what it speaks to, that the fact that they're willing to engage, and this goes for all learners, is that actually what we should be doing pretty much all the while is pitching simulations at a technical level, which are comfortably around the learner's level of capability, and it's about the other stuff
that might make some academics uncomfortable.
Yeah,
because they'll have to up their technical game.
This is the thing. Like it should, but for the learner group, it shouldn't be. Propose an airway management scenario that a consultant anaesthetist is not in some way capable of managing. Actually, it's not so much about the airway; it's about the team and about the whole situation.
And this is what we happened, because within the military, you're using different equipment to what you're not using in your trust. Does that make sense? I mean, it's a different ventilator. It's a different, we can't plug into the oxygen cylinder here. You're plugging into, the one on the floor and stuff like that. And it's all that piece. I think I answered that. Yeah.
No, so it was just an observation from me, really. I just think it was interesting.
What have you learned the most from your work in implementing SPL within nursing curricula?
That you don't be afraid to adapt what you're doing. You'll make mistakes. You will. And I think one of my key objectives of coming on here is to say it is achievable as well. As much as I start saying, you don't have to do it just because you can. You can. Does that make sense? If you want to, but you've got to have the right intent on why you want to do it. Okay, I want to do it because I see the value in delivering this.
It's value.
It's
not the fact that it claims a tariff and some income generation.
No, it's value. And like I said, and the way I think I've delivered it is because of the student feedback's always been so positive. There's always things, I felt I wanted a bit of a break before I went in placement, stuff like that. There's always that. But I think because you can see the value in it, and you can see the value at the beginning of the week with the student when they start to when they finish, is massive. So I think the biggest thing I'd say I'd learn is don't be afraid to fail, absolutely adapt to what you've got and listen to your learners. At the end of the day, why are we doing this? We're doing this for the learner. We're not doing it just because my boss says they want me to deliver SPL. I want my learner to get out of it. Because if not, I'd rather them be in placement. If they're not enjoying it, I'd rather them be in placement. And of course, I want to support the NHS. I want to reduce placement capacity. But that's not my key driving force to deliver SPL. I want the learning experience to outweigh everything. So, and I think that's what's made me design the SPL how I have and how it scaffolds across the program. For stage 2, we focus more around those Annex B skills, especially for mental health nurses who struggle to get that signed off in practice.
Yeah.
So I focus it around that. And then in stage 3, I move more into sort of leadership, more acute patients, being practice supervisors, practice assessors.
When you talked about stage 2 and 3, in stage 1, how much of the pre-learning, if you like, do you have to do? Presumably you have to work with learners for them to understand what SPL is about? And
Yeah. So what I tend to do is from the get-go in their skills module, they will have some elements of simulation and sort of, explained about. Now, could we always do that better? Yes. So they do get introduced there, but before they come on to SPL, I hold a online forum that they can attend. They can ask me any questions. I speak to them about what the SPL involves, talk lots about psychological safety, about debrief, and what the intended learning outcomes are before they even come. So they know what to expect.
Yeah.
I do think it's a bit of a culture shift. I'll be honest. One of the big things that I'm really hot on, again, is I suppose that unseen curriculum is professional values and professional boundaries, what I expect for when they're there. They laugh about that from the military, and my standards are quite high. I expect them to be shiny. I don't make them shine their shoes, but I do expect them to come in neat uniform, punctual and all that. Because
we've had a work colleague who used to be ex-military, and he was very much like that, wasn't he?
I don't want, it's because I try and get across to them. What you are demonstrating to me here is my only view I've got of how you're going to work with those patients. And my take-home message to them is, would I want you looking after my nan?
5-star service, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's really important. So I'm really trying, even in the first week, even when they first meet me, professional standards is so high, and that's all I sort of, one of my main things.
The thing is it's actually, there's real meaning to that, because if you rehearse, poor professionalism in simulation, well, what's going to happen? It'll translate over into practice. Yeah. And that's why you have to try and do it in real time. You have to try and take the stuff out of the packets if you can.
Absolutely.
Because actually it's part of the reality. So no, I'm all for that.
I agree, and that's part of simulation that can easily get forgotten, particularly when you're working in a centre and you reuse certain bits to try and keep costs down. Little things like opening packets or picking up a phone, like we mentioned earlier. It's all part of it.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I say, with it as well, be really responsive to your practice educators and the practice partners' feedback. One of the big things they fed back to me is about how our students weren't digitally ready to go into placement. So when I was always designing this, always after the feedback from them, our students weren't digitally ready. They were turning into the placement area, didn't really know how to, record observations on systems, on patient record systems and stuff. So I implemented SimEPR, which is another platform that you can use to be able to, make your students more digitally ready for practice. But again, any modality I've brought into the SPL has to have a purpose. I don't just use it because it looks nice and shiny.
Do you get your practice educators and practice partners involved with SPL?
Yeah. So some
linking that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll bring people in from practice and they'll come and act as the practice supervisors for us as well, which I think...
So they can see that SPL isn't replacing its complement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nice. And it's important, isn't it? And to get their feedback on it. So
something we touched on right at the start was you've just embarked on a PhD.
I have just embarked on a PhD.
So what does the trajectory look like? Part-time over 5?
Part-time over 5, yeah.
So 5-ish.
5-ish.
So what's the plan for that? Because I'm guessing it all ties in with what you've been talking about.
Yeah. So what I want to look at on whether simulation is improving patient safety and care outcomes in the clinical placement area. So looking at my pre-reg nursing, so I'm facing it around pre-reg nursing at the moment. Already at the minute you start, I'm very early days, just to say, start of January. So already my pre-read and stuff, I think, do I want this bigger than this? Does that make sense? Do I want to look at actually how much? Because we know simulation improves knowledge, right? Yeah, there's loads of evidence out there, loads of evidence. Is there loads of evidence out there that it really affects patient safety? So that's what I'm trying to
that sounds amazing. That sounds like we'll definitely keep a close eye. We definitely have to.
I'm going to try not to get us out of any jobs. That we can still got a job to continue within simulation, but
simulation makes patients
unsafe.
No
difference.
I think that's almost certainly not the case. So best of luck with that.
Thank you.
If anything, it's just going to mean we need to do more research into it.
Yes, it is.
Until we force it, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, I think it's one of those things, though, isn't it? That there is evidence that simulation improves learning. There's evidence that it improves communication. But the step to say this enhances patient safety for these reasons would actually be a phenomenally important piece of the puzzle in terms of building the academic backing to what we intuitively know to be the case.
It gives SPL so much more credence. It's so important.
And I want to focus it around like deteriorating patients, how much students are sort of noticing that. And, And we know we do it, ATE assessment, and if you notice this, and making sure early warning scores and raising all that. But I want to kind of look at that aspect as well, and what impact and what part of the simulation is having the effect. Is it the pre-brief? Is it the debrief? Is it the sim itself? Is it the way you're delivering the sim? So there's loads around. I want to, like I say, very early days on what I want to do. But so yeah, that's my plan with that.
Sounds amazing. We're definitely going to have to hear about that more in future.
Okay.
Yeah. Lindsay, thank you so much for coming on the episode. It's been fantastic listening to all the work that you're doing, and like we said, we're really looking forward to seeing this fledgling PhD turn into something beautiful further down the line.
Absolutely, I'm sure it will.
4 or 5 years time.
It's been really good. Thank you so much for your time and for coming over here. And I'm sure, like so many of the things that you've said and the challenges and the solutions are going to resonate really strongly with the audience. So thank you. Yeah,
and thank you very much for having me. And just to say, anyone listening, I'm all for sharing. So anybody who's listened today and think, I want to know more about Lindsay's hybrid model, I always will share resources, because we're all trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, and thank you for that. So that's really in the spirit of what we're trying to do.
We'll have a little chat off camera about any links or anything that we can put with the episode description.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you for listening or for watching this episode of SimCast. We hope you've enjoyed it and you've taken loads of stuff away. And we look forward to seeing you again on the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.